You know that feeling you're driving along and you feel a strange vibration through your hands. You ever wonder what that actually means? Well, your steering wheel is so much more than just a way to turn the car. Think of it as your car's main way of communicating with you. It's a direct line to your tires, your suspension, and your brakes. So today, we're going to learn its language so you can understand exactly what your car is trying to tell you. And that right there is the key. That little shake you feel, that slight pull to one side, that's not just a quirk, it's a signal. It's energy that's being sent to you for a reason, telling you that a physical law is being broken somewhere in the system. Ignoring it is like ignoring a warning light on your dash, except this one is coming directly through your hands.
Okay, let's start with a really common one, something most of us have probably felt at some point. You're out on the highway, everything feels smooth, and then right as you get up to, say, 70 or 80 kilometers per hour, the steering wheel starts to shimmy. So what's going on? Well, this almost always points to one of two main culprits, an unbalanced wheel or a problem with the tire itself.
So how can something so small cause such a big shake? Well, when you're at speed, your wheel wants to spin perfectly, like a top. But if the weight isn't distributed just right, it starts to wobble. What we call a static imbalance creates a sort of vertical hop, an up and down motion. And a dynamic imbalance, that causes more of a side-to-side shimmy. Either way, that vibration travels right up the steering column and into your hands. And you won't believe how little it takes. We're talking about just 5 to 7 grams. That's it. That's about the weight of 2 small coins. That tiny amount of imbalance is enough to create a really noticeable vibration when you're on the highway. And that's exactly why wheel balancing has to be so precise. Technicians use a special machine to spin the wheel and add tiny counterweights to get it absolutely perfect. But what if you've already had the wheels balanced and that vibration is still there? Well, the next place you gotta look is the tire itself. It could have developed flat spots from sitting too long, or worse, the internal steel belts might be starting to fail. But the most critical sign, the one you absolutely cannot ignore, is a bubble or a bulge in the sidewall. That is an immediate red flag. It means the tire structure is compromised, and it could fail at any moment. Okay, symptom number 2 is a dead giveaway. The car drives perfectly smooth, no issues at all, but the second you put your foot on the brake pedal, the steering wheel starts to pulse or shake in your hands. If that's happening, it's pointing directly to an issue with your front brake rotors. Now, the common term you'll hear everywhere is that you've got warped rotors. It's what everyone says, but from an engineering standpoint, it's not really what's happening. So what's the real story? The real culprit is something called disc thickness variation, or DTV for short. Your rotors don't usually bend out of shape like a piece of plastic. Instead, over time, their surface develops tiny high and low spots. This means that as the rotor spins, its thickness actually varies by a tiny amount. And this shows you exactly how that tiny imperfection gets to your hands. As your brake pads squeeze against that uneven surface, they're forced to move in and out, ever so slightly. That movement makes the caliper piston pulse. That pulse then creates an oscillation in the hydraulic brake fluid, and that vibration travels all the way up to the steering wheel. It's a perfect chain reaction. And again, the numbers here are mind-bogglingly small. A thickness variation of just 10 to 15 microns, which is literally thinner than a single human hair, is enough to cause that distinct pulsing feeling. It just goes to show you how incredibly sensitive your car's braking and steering systems really are. All right, next up, let's talk about that feeling when you're constantly fighting your car just to keep it driving in a straight line. If your car is pulling to one side, it's not just annoying. It's a clear sign of an imbalance, and it usually boils down to one of 3 things: your tire pressure, your wheel alignment, or a brake that's decided it doesn't want to let go. The first, and by far the easiest thing to check, is your tire pressure. See, a tire that's low on air has more rolling resistance, more drag, and that will literally pull the car toward that side. And it doesn't take much at all. A difference of just 3 to 5 psi is enough for you to feel it. That's why checking your pressures regularly is so important. And remember to always do it when the tires are cold to get an accurate reading. So if your tire pressures are good, the next suspect on the list is your wheel alignment. This just refers to the very precise angles of your wheels. For example, camber is the inward or outward tilt, and caster is the angle of the steering pivot. If these angles aren't perfectly symmetrical on both sides, even a tiny difference of about 1 degree, it can cause the car to drift to one side. And the third possible cause is a sticking brake caliper.
This is when the caliper doesn't fully release after you take your foot off the brake, so it's creating constant drag on just one wheel. Here's a simple way you can check for this. After a drive, carefully go around and feel your wheels. A sticking caliper can make one wheel noticeably hotter than the others, sometimes by more than 20 degrees Celsius.
And that brings us to our final symptom, and I have to be clear, this is by far the most serious one. This is when your steering feels loose, vague. Maybe there's a dead spot right in the center. You turn the wheel, but there's a delay before the car actually responds. This is not an annoyance. This is a direct warning about the structural integrity of your steering system. Let me be perfectly clear about this. Loose steering isn't a sign that a problem is developing. It's a sign that something critical has already failed. This is your car giving you its final warning before a potential catastrophic failure of a steering component. So what's happening here? Well, a critical joint in your steering system, like a tie rod end, has worn out. It's developed play, which means there's a gap where there should be a solid, tight connection. This slack acts like a delay, forcing you to constantly make these tiny corrections just to keep the car going straight. And that becomes incredibly dangerous at higher speeds. And this is the absolute worst-case scenario. A severely worn joint, especially a tie rod end, can physically separate from the wheel while you are driving. The result is an immediate and complete loss of steering control on that wheel. It is every bit as dangerous as it sounds. So here's the crucial point to take away from all this. Your steering wheel is connected to every single critical system that keeps your car pointed in the right direction. Any fault in your tires, your brakes, or your suspension has to travel through the steering system, which gives you a physical warning right in your hands before it becomes a crisis. So, to wrap it all up, here's a quick cheat sheet. If you're feeling that vibration at high speeds, you're looking at wheel imbalance or tire damage. If the vibration only happens when you brake, it's almost certainly your rotors. If the car is pulling you to one side, check your tire pressure, then your alignments, or a sticking brake. And most importantly, if that steering feels loose at all, that is an urgent warning to get your steering components inspected immediately. In the end, small symptoms you feel through your steering wheel are not just comfort issues. They're mechanical warnings, plain and simple, expressed through force and vibration. If your steering wheel feels different today than it did yesterday, it's because something has already changed. Something is already wearing out. The only question is, are you listening?